Coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to Africa Focus, where we bring you news from across the continent right here on Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcal. Start interacting with us on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Church M on Twitter and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Church. Send in an SMS via 22999 free of charge. But first, here are stories making headlines. The World Health Organization says it will push for 220 million doses for Africa when a COVID-19 vaccine becomes available. Virus exposes health gap in Tunisia. Roasted field mice has become an unlikely savior in rural areas of Malawi. Kicking off the bulletin, the World Health Organization insists that they will not endorse a vaccine that has not proven safe and effective. Speaking in a virtual briefing, Director General Tedros Adhanom stressed that the organization will never back a vaccine that has not proven safe and effective amid concerns over efforts to rush the development of a jab for COVID-19.
With the COVID-19 virus having spread across the globe, governments hoping to deploy a vaccine as soon as possible against the virus, which has infected over 26 million people, killed hundreds, upended millions of lives, and wreaked havoc on the global economy.
As to the anti-vax movement, they can build narratives to fight against vaccines, but the track record of vaccines tells its own story.
Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, however, welcomed several candidates' vaccines for COVID-19, having moved to advanced stages of testing, and voiced hope that one would soon become available.
The first priority must be to vaccinate some people in all countries rather than all people in some countries. This is not just a moral imperative and a public health imperative. It's also an economic imperative.
But while the World Health Organization says it expects to see results from a range of phase 3 final stage trials by the end of the year, it on Friday tempered hopes that a vaccine is imminent, saying widespread vaccination is not expected to begin until middle of 2021.
Evidence shows that corticosteroids can be life-saving for patients on oxygen and ventilators. However, corticosteroids do not help patients with mild or moderate disease and can be harmful. WHO therefore recommends the use of corticosteroids only in patients who are severely or critically ill.
Under normal procedures, test administrators must wait for months or years to verify that a vaccine candidates are safe and efficacious. But as the pandemic continues to take a devastating toll, there has been massive pressure to roll out a vaccine quickly, sparking concerns that testing standards could be lowered. Daniel Kariuki for Switch TV.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization, WHO, says it will push for 220 million doses for Africa when a COVID-19 vaccine becomes available. The Vaccine Alliance, Gavi, and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, CEPI, are part of the initiative known as COVAX.
Once there is a vaccine that is licensed and approved, COVAX will work to secure at least 220 million doses of vaccine for the continent. This will not necessarily cover all the needs of the continent, but at least will cover 20% of the African population, initially prioritizing those who are at the front line, the healthcare workers, then expanding to cover vulnerable groups such as the elderly or those with a pre-existing condition.
I believe there are 9 vaccines that have now entered the last stage of clinical testing, phase 3 clinical trials. Many more vaccines, probably over 35 at this point, have entered human clinical trials, and they are being tested in a number of settings globally. And it is important to test vaccines in different populations because there can be different responses among different populations.
From the Equatorial Guinea perspective, I think the government position has consistently been that all effort to contain the pandemic in the country has to be free for all citizens.
Away from that, dozens of activists from South African radical left-wing Economic Freedom Fighters Party picketed outside stores of a leading retail pharmacy over a controversial racist hair advertisement which described black hair as dull and white hair as normal. The company, which boasts of more than 500 branches across South Africa, has apologized and pulled down the adverts.
Protesters gathered outside several pharmacy chain stores in South Africa in reaction to a shampoo advertisement slammed by critics as racist. The Clicks advert had pictures of African hair labeled dry, dull and damaged, while an example of white hair was described as fine and flat.
So Clicks must take full responsibility of putting in their website an advert that dehumanizes black people. That basically says that black people's hair is rubbish. We'll never accept that. That is what colonialism and apartheid did for centuries. That is what slavery did to our people.
The images sparked an uproar and gave birth to hashtags racism must fall and black hair is normal, with black women posting images of their afros on Twitter.
So we're here to stop Clicks from operating. If they open, we enter. If they open, we're going to enter, and there will not be any operation that is going to exist here. And there's not any form of court order or any intimidation that is going to stop us from protesting against racism.
The company, which boasts of more than 500 branches across South Africa, has apologized and pulled down the adverts. However, the company has threatened legal action against the EFF party.
If they want physical confrontation, we dare them to open this place. We said that they must close all the stores or we'll close them ourselves. So it's closed now. We've achieved our objective in terms of what has happened today. And that is how it is going to be like. Everywhere where Clicks exists.
Elsewhere, roasted field mice have always been a traditional seasonal snack in the southern African country of Malawi, even when food was bountiful. However, under the crippling impact of COVID-19, this unique delicacy has become an unlikely savior in rural areas. Take a look.
Roasted field mice kebabs are a popular Malawian delicacy. Vendors usually sell mice meat next to this busy highway between commercial hub of Balenta and the capital Lilongwe. Bernard Simeon is a mouse hunter. Now, during the coronavirus pandemic, his small trade has gained new importance.
Since the start of COVID-19, life has been difficult. As a result, we rely on mice hunting and selling so that we can sustain our livelihood.
Traditionally, village children hunt the mice, smoking them out of their holes. These are then cooked, salted or dried. Some Malawians choose to eat mice, but at the moment for others like Simeon's family, it's the only meat they can get.
Most times, we rely on my husband when he goes out and works. When times are hard, we rely on mice to supplement our diet because we cannot afford to buy meat due to the lack of money.
Mice meat might conjure up ideas of unsafe and unsanitary food, but local health authorities don't discourage their consumption.
They still, if ever your community is able to take mice, you are able to take mice, it's one of the source of proteins. So you are free to take whatever is there, so as you get the required or the recommended amount of proteins.
More than 50% of Malawians already lived below the poverty line before virus struck. The country has now under 6,000 official cases of COVID-19, but the economy, people's livelihoods have been the biggest victims. Long after the virus has disappeared, mice might still be an important food source on the household table. David Kagina, Switch TV.
Time to take a breather. Stay with us here on Africa Focus. Still to come, we bring a special future on the unbalanced future. Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Keep interacting with us on our social media platforms. On Twitter, it's at Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha M, and as well on Facebook, Joel Chacha and Switch TV Kenya. Moving on, mental health has been part and parcel of our daily lives. However, sometimes people shun away from opening up about whatever they're going through. The idea of using call counseling without one expressing themselves one-on-one with a counselor has been successful, as most people have been helped through this. Fatma Ngwena visited the Kenya Red Cross Emergency Operations Center and paints a picture of how it works.
Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how one thinks, feels, and acts. It also helps to determine how people handle stress, relate to others, and make choices, making it to be important at every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood.
Later on, like 2 years ago, we were able to establish a call center that was able to offer psychosocial support to people who have distress, and we usually have counselors who also offer psychosocial support to those people.
Sometimes people tend to shun away from opening up directly to counselors whenever they're going through mental health.
A call center needs to have adequate space, good sound regulation, so that the caller can be able to feel confidential. Another thing, we need to have good contact management using the proper data management system. We need to have integration between the computer and the telephone that usually offer the services. Another thing we need to have is automatic, response, interactive response. When a caller calls, there is something that the software that directs them towards us.
Kenya Red Cross Emergency Operations Center is one of the organizations that have come out in approach to solve the whole mental health nightmare through call counseling.
And also day to day, we usually receive like 38 to 60 calls, but that depends on the seasons, because when COVID was starting, we used to receive up to 100 calls per day.
The call center has been able to reach out to a wide range of people, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, since it works hand in hand with the Ministry of Health.
So I can say that it doesn't distinguish, but at the same time we also have some prevalence, like women when it comes to depression. Because of their nature, I can say that women are more prevalent, to depression compared to men, and that's a fact and a statistic that has been proved. More so when it comes to postpartum depression.
However, according to Evans Delizu, as much as mental health does not choose on gender or age, it has a large prevalence to women than men. Everyone faces challenges in their lives that impact to their mental health, and it is said there is no health without mental health. Fatma Ngwena, Switch TV.
Since the coronavirus pandemic struck the country, all learning institutions have remained shut, with students still at home. Virtual learning has been embraced by the haves, while the haves, not who are the majority, have remained disadvantaged and almost losing hope of the future of their education. Our reporter Andrew Okero transversed the county of Machakos here in Kenya and prepared this special feature on the unbalanced future.
Education is the best investment most parents consider venturing in by educating their children. But the investment has become poor since the coronavirus struck, rendering educational institutions helpless and without a clear indication to take. Along the way, programs were enrolled for online classes and broadcasting networks were incorporated, all in a bid to save the sinking ship of education. But how many students are benefiting from the programs put in place? Is the method effective to them? Join us on our way to Machakos County to give you the revelation. The journey of about 60 kilometers to the county of Machakos took us 1.5 hours. We were determined to unearth the state of education in the countryside. In this part of the country, as expected, all the learning institutions, including universities, are still closed. It's about 7 months since COVID-19 was first reported in Kenya, upon which all the learning institutions were closed with immediate effect following the presidential directive. Almost every sector has been hit by the pandemic, and education is still bearing the brunt of the invisible enemy, putting many students in doubt of their educational future.
Unaweza pata tu umesota una credo ya kufanya nini, ya kupata updates from classes, hata uwezi communicate.
Sababu hawasomi, hata wakienda shule sijui kama watasikia kitu. Sababu wamekaa sana, wakaanza maisha ingine ya kukaa huku nyumbani.
The government, through the Ministry of Education, has found itself between a rock and a hard place on how to get students back to the normal school calendar, with the skyrocketing coronavirus infections, save for the last few weeks, where the number of new cases is seemingly decreasing. The situation the World Health Organization (WHO) has pegged on less mass testing in Kenya. The online learning introduced by the government has not benefited many students, especially those living in upcountry or informal settlements, where parents are more focused on where to get food for their children than a smartphone or a TV or bundles for internet.
Yes, it could be an alternative if really in 2013 the laptop project was rolled out properly and digital learning program was done properly. It was badly done.
Massive village in Kavombo is situated just a few kilometers from Machakos town. We are welcomed by a glaring poverty.
Wanasoma kwa online, ukiwa una touch huwezi soma. Na wengine unapata wako na button, huwezi soma nayo.
Kama wazazi hawana pesa, hawezi andika mwalimu atusomeshe.
I mean, there are certain things which somebody must do it practical. This kind of excitement that certain institutions are really pushing because maybe they want to prove that maybe they are ahead of the pack.
Machakos is among the counties that recorded the highest teenage pregnancy cases, majority of those who got pregnant being school-going children. But whose fault is it?
Kama huyu wa kijana ako na siku 3. Unajua msichana anaweza kwenda mahali kuna msichana mwingine. Anaenda mahali kuna mwanaume.
Saa zingine unamuona usiku hata ukitaba huyo mtoto asikii sababu amefundishwa na wengi huko nje.
And the answer is not reopening of schools. Our girls will still remain within our society. I have mentioned one thing. We are complaining in this country about loss of values. Family values are key.
Amos Kaboro is an educational expert. He says children staying home for months does not translate to hopelessness.
So unasoma ufanye nini? Na hakuna walimu. Walimu hawezi kusomesha.
She may have forgotten 1 + 1 is equals to 2, but there's also so much converse which she has learned. So have we also stopped to ask ourselves, what have they gained that they didn't have?
Parents are tasked with a unique responsibility to make sure that their children get the best upbringing.
There are children who had never seen their parents. Father is away from 5 a.m. and comes back at midnight, from Monday to Friday. Now they have got time. People are able now to understand their children.
Dr. Richard Bosire is a senior lecturer at the University of Nairobi and the chairman of the Lecturers Association at the university. Bosire has always been opposing the concept of virtual learning.
Someone who comes to reports to university in sandals or with just one pair of trousers, how do you expect this person to buy a smartphone? Or how do you expect this person to buy a laptop?
He says not many can even keep up with the digital learning.
Let every student access the education. If we want to segregate and say children of the poor, we don't care about that, I think we should have taken the country back.
Even though the Education Ministry is yet to officially decide when schools will reopen, depending on the country's COVID-19 curve, parents have expressed mixed reactions on resuming of schools.
Serikali ifungue shule. Ijue vile inapambana na corona. Kwa sababu tutakosa sana na tutapoteza watoto wengi.
We don't want to exercise jurisdiction of taking care of our children. We want others to do it. And particularly we want teachers to do it.
A report issued by the Ministry of Health indicates that a lot of young people are already contracting the virus out of ignorance. So the question begs, if schools were to reopen by early next year as hinted by the Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha? Will the government be ready to protect learners against the deadly virus?
Invest heavily in expanding dormitories, classrooms, and all that. And if you expand dormitories and classrooms, you're going also to expand the number of teachers to teach, because a teacher cannot teach beyond a certain number of lessons.
Parents, the government, and educational institutions, they all have a role to play to safeguard the future of the society and that of the country at large in matters education. You have a role. I have a role. We have a role. Andrew Kero, Switch TV, the unbalanced corona education.
Crossing borders now, the coronavirus pandemic has put the spotlight on struggling health services in southeast Tunisia, with residents and doctors in a COVID-19 hotspot deploring a lack of equipment and medics.
The conviction of Khalid Drareni is the expression of a judicial harassment against the Algerians, the citizens who are invested in the popular movement, a movement which, I remind you, is a peaceful, democratic, popular and dignified movement. And so today, we see that the regime has no voice and it has chosen the one of authoritarianism, which exercises violence against all Algerians who demand democratic change.
De tous les Algériens qui exigent un changement démocratique.
We send a strong message to our colleagues in Algeria, to Khalid and to other recently imprisoned colleagues, to tell them that they are not alone, that today even a small gesture counts a lot, and that the Tunisian journalists and the Union of National Tunisian Journalists support them for free, and the independent press against censorship, oppression and the dictatorship of regimes.
La dictature des régimes aujourd'hui.
He is a journalist who writes, same as all journalists, about the concerns of the people. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and it's a conviction of conscience, a conviction against free speech, because journalists are the reflection of their people.
Par contre, Khalid a écopé de 3 ans ferme en première instance.
Khalid was sentenced to 3 years from the beginning, and the message is very clear. The regime in Algeria no longer tolerates a free and independent practice from the press. It does longer tolerate that a free and independent journalists and media informs the Algeria and some other people about what is happening in Algeria.
Et un peu tout le monde par rapport à ce qui se passe en Algérie.
That's all we had on Africa Focus today, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, to Joel Chacha M on Twitter and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Chacha and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Until next time, do have yourself a great day.